But if I can real quick, we're all over the place here, but there's a few things. First of all, I learned tonight that a friend of mine in a band, his dad wrote the first Friday the 13th. And I don't know how you, like, if that's your dad, I don't know how you don't lead with that for your entire life. But I had no idea. I learned that tonight. And that kind of backs up, like, the point of, like, it wasn't like there was even a genre called, like, slasher movies or something along those lines, which comes back to the establishment of tropes. Like, think of stoners. Think of, like, these kinds of movies and how they view stoners. Oh, they're smoking the pot. Up. Right? This is, like, one of the first movies to really do that. And that became a trope because of Halloween. And then that gradually became, like, an archetype. And that became a cliche, almost. But then there's also...
I want to argue the fact that I don't think that was intentional either. Like, I think that it's
of course not.
People brainstorming. What do teenagers do? Teenagers, they would be in a car smoking pot, listening to "Don't Fear the Reaper," wanting more cowbell. They go to their cowbell dealer. He gives them a little more cowbell, and then they're all.
I got to be clear. I think it's exactly the opposite of, like, being intentional. I think it's just they were trying to portray kids being kids. And of course, like, around that time period, I think, oh, hey, no parents around, like, we're hanging out. Let's smoke some pot. Okay. And that is a thing. But then also, like, other tropes that it accidentally sort of created, right? Like, one of the creepiest things to me about the movie is that when Laurie is, like, running house to house trying to get help, and, like, the one neighbor, like, turns off the lights and, like, closes.
Oh yeah, no, it's fucked up.
Terrifying. Almost more terrifying than you got a killer running after you. Like this fucking asshole over here who, like, runs his lawnmower at 8 a.m. isn't gonna let me in when there's a killer after me.
But that's kind of.
Well, they think it's a Halloween prank, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. There's all kinds of reasons.
Just kids, kids. It's just kids doing stuff.
Just kids doing stuff.
Pranks. Maybe not.
I mean, even the cop in this movie, like, actually speaks about somebody smoking pot in a very chill way. Like, the cop is like, kids, that's what they do. They smoke pot. What do you do?
Well, like the Killdozer song, "The Pig Was Cool."
It's Suburbia though, right? Like a thing that they've said before about the Laurie character is, like, she's never experienced anything bad until this point, really. Like, not anything horrifying anyway. That's why the trauma in the latest one, which John Carpenter helped, create, is so amassed in her, because it's not like she's kind of, a rough and tumble kid that finds her friend murdered. She's literally just like an innocent babysitter that's never seen a dead body. You know what I mean? Like, never experienced anything actually traumatic, that all of a sudden they find 5 of their dead friends in a room, which I think, it's the Suburbia point, right? Oh, like but also, like, it's the Suburbia point of, like, Suburbia is supposed to be somewhere safe. And it's an amazing location for horror for that reason. Like, it's all very white people, upper middle class or middle class people living in very depersonalized housing situations,
right?
Having perfectly manicured lawns. And in the minds of a lot of people, that's what they're aspiring to be. But it's also ripe for horror, because somebody walking through a suburban neighborhood just killing people, that's where you leave your doors open. Or your door unlocked. You know what I mean? Like, that's where you leave the windows.
Not Laurie's neighbors, but yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can even, like, think of the serial killer itself in the most recent iteration, which is not like a Jack the Ripper figure. Like, it's a person who is like cold-blooded, completely, like, detached and removed from their surroundings. And it's like, I was thinking about how the serial killer itself is kind of like a very interesting neoliberal archetype of a person without a personality. Someone who just, like, takes the shape of the vessel and just, like, kills it at the end, and that's kind of how, which is kind of similar to how, like, even Hannibal Lecter eats people.
Only because Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer.
Sorry,
I said only because Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer.
I mean, that's just a fact. We all know that. That's
right. So it's like it's interesting how, like, the serial killer is kind of like almost an archetype of individualism. Where basically it's essentially revealing itself to be a kid left alone, and that's why I feel like it's also kind of cool that it's not really
Culkin. It's Macaulay Culkin, it's the Home Alone 4.
Home Alone kid, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the 60s version of the Home Alone kid. It's Rosemary's Baby. It's not Home Alone. So it's like, but at the same time, it's kind of also an important, I think, like, thing to pay attention to, because the horror of so to say, I guess like you could call it the American dream, or the creation of the middle class, is essentially the fact that it would be some kind of finality, and it would lead to like a degradation of society of some sort, or like you would plateau out in your life, and you would have nothing of interest happening to you, to the extent that there is no plot. Again, like we're talking about, we had this chat about the Birds, how there was no plot other than the killer. And it's kind of similar, right? Like it's just a bunch of people hanging out and talking about smoking pot and like, having sex and whatnot. But he is the one who actually brings the plot into the story, into the picture. Without him, there is no plot. And that's kind of also fascinating, maybe how a serial killer also thinks, like that they make their own story and make other people pawns in it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that, we want things to happen for, shout out to Ben Burgess, a little bit of logic. We want a logic to why someone's killing someone. We want rationality. We want some kind of narrative that explains to us, like, this is why this is happening. And the way that the sequels kind of, I think, at least in the minds of like Danny McBride and everyone who wrote the 2018 one, the sequels gave it a logic, because all of a sudden, like, oh, well, there's the plot twist and it's the sister, like all this different stuff. Like, but there is no logic to it. Like the 2018 one is going back to the exact basic form that John Carpenter wanted to take, which is the fact that it's literally terrorism for them. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no logic to it. There's no rationale. Yeah.
It's like based in reality. There's Busta Rhymes spin kicking someone outside a window. There aren't any fucking druids involved. Like it's real. Like it's something that could happen next door down the street.
But it's not real in the sequel remake 2018 version, because like if it was real, like people would have like financial stress, because you can't, like the whole town seems to have been like trapped in like this weird bubble where there's no outside forces giving it any problems. And if it had like a little bit of capitalist realism sprinkled into it, that would have actually created Laurie Strode's daughter did really well for herself, becoming a psychologist and is making bank, and everybody's kind of jealous of her, and her
husband got peanut butter on his penis.
Yeah,
I mean, hey, could it?
But there's nothing to kind of to discuss like the current because in the 70s there was a bit of a malaise in the the whole was a stagflation, but like we're 40 years into frickin' Reaganomics, so where was that in this movie?
Oh yeah, but is it incumbent on the movie to show that? I mean, I get,
it makes it relatable.
It's about a dude killing people too, dude. I mean, like, I get it, but like,
I mean, the old Halloween seems to show it though. Like the old Halloween seems to show the kind of almost zombified generation sitting in front of a TV. If on the one hand, like the girls, the babysitters are chatting on the phone with each other to the extent that they don't even see a person intruding the entering the house. The kids are basically, they can't even hear what the when the babysitter yells out to her, or even the boy. I guess the boy is a little more vigilant because he's got his little like taekwondo outfit or whatever, like the karate outfit on. And that's also fascinating because it kind of shows this dimension of like kids having extracurricular interests, but also at the same time having to be trapped in the house and whatnot. And also kind of fascinating, I thought that like Mike Myers is institutionalized for 15 years, which is, I guess, like about as much time as it's going to take for you to go through high school, like go through K through 12. And it's probably, like that's like the Pink Floyd song comes to mind. And of course, like, John Carpenter also made Children of the, what's the name of the movie? Like Children of the Corn or Dawn of the Dead. I might be confusing.
Didn't make Dawn. Definitely didn't.
Village of the Damned is the one he directed.
Village of the Damned.
That's, I was gonna say Children of the
Eaton and the Damned.
They're all great movies.
Third one.
Right.
Well, I was gonna bring up our Friday conversation that we're gonna have about Dawn of the Dead for a very similar reason.
Yeah,
because
what a great segue.
That's a very different form of a similar idea about consumerism and the literal zombification, of course, a little bit too on the nose, I think. But like of the American consumer, of the American suburban middle class, upper class kind of person who literally gets turned into a zombie and goes back to the mall because they're like, where else am I gonna fucking go?
I was gonna real quick, if I could, Forrest, and I wanted to get your take on this or everyone's take. It's interesting. You're pointing out that the original Halloween is a very suburban sort of setting, and you can imagine these people sort of being like upper middle class or middle class. But it's interesting in the sequel. A lot of
Nixon voters.
What's interesting is, so 10 years later, when you get Halloween 4, they actually start portraying Haddonfield as like a rundown, like redneck or hick sort of town, and that actually I think carries on even you see elements of that in the 2018 movie. Like you almost get the impression that they're in the boonies. So it's interesting how the setting of Halloween and Haddonfield itself has sort of changed over the years.
They also make sure to that you understand that it's not just a white neighborhood anymore, right? Like the kid that's getting babysat by Vicky is a black kid. Like they're making sure that that this is a different kind of time period where it's not just kind of like I can't think of a black character whatsoever in the original Halloween. I think that reinforces the fact that this is supposed to be like a safe middle class suburban white neighborhood that's no longer safe suburban. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that it makes sense for the background of that horror movie. But it is interesting that they make sure to show you like a far more diverse Haddonfield.
I mean, right now
that kid is like one of the coolest characters. That kid's awesome.
Oh, that kid was like the best character that wasn't
the best part of the movie. Yeah, the Michael himself. Family. Yeah.
It is the time of like the kind of minority characters like getting to live the sort of, so to say, picket fence. At least the gentrified, the ones who are able to at least like striving. Or able to live the quote unquote American dream, the scanty few who are able to do it.
Which isn't untrue, but is often provided without the conflict that actually does go with that, which kind of does happen at the time of the original, like around the time of the original Halloween, where Nixon's election and like a lot of the stuff that comes after that is kind of a direct response to like this NIMBY attitude in those suburban neighborhoods, like not in my back, like what I mean, like not wanting black families to move in, not wanting minority families to move in of any kind.
Busing.
Like, yeah. So
someone should make a deep fake of Halloween where they replace the Michael Myers mask with Nixon's face.
I feel like I mentioned. I feel like I had a weird. Oh, maybe I was listening to that podcast and they said, "Oh yeah, I was listening to that podcast." Maybe I don't actually talk to anyone in real life. Somebody said something about a Nixon, because I was thinking about a Nixon mask, and then they were like, "Oh, if there was a Nixon mask, like you'd always remember that it was Nixon." That what I mean? Like, so then it would feel like a political movie.
Yeah, it's almost better that it's just like this sort of like the mask is kind of so amorphous and non-identifiable that it became an icon in and of itself. Like that's how I think that.
Just like William Shatner.
It's baby faced, I feel like, and I mean, and that's why I think it's kind of it's almost innocent in a way. You kind of feel sorry for the guy looking at it, because it feels like he's trying to be on the one hand it's cold-blooded and it's like sociopathic, completely drawing a blank on the outside, not expressing anything. But on the other hand, there's also like this very clear like baby facedness of a character who probably remains the age that he was when he committed the first horrific act, and it's kind of like almost a tragic tale, because like it's almost like showing the American dream as like a tragedy almost, because it's like saying that you have no choice but to have your like little kids, a little boy especially, go down this route of like becoming his own worst nightmare and like everybody else's worst nightmare or something like that.
I mean, I think that reading too much into it politically though isn't always the best idea, because like the central point of what John Carpenter, at least in the original, was trying to do is just scare the shit out of you. Like, you know what I mean? Like he was trying to take something that seems safe and scare the shit out of you. His later work, obviously, like the leftist influences, I think, creeps in a lot more, and he's an amazing subversive director. But just specifically for this movie, what he's trying to do is just make this movie as terrifying as possible. And I wanted to enter this into the record, I guess. This is the trope thing from the Halloween Unmasked that they talked to Jamie Lee Curtis about what they were actually trying to do with the tropes, because I think it's kind of enlightening to hear this.
What's the difference? Well, Scream Queens are all great horror actresses. Final Girls are a smaller subgroup, like distinguishing between all birds and flamingos. Final Girls exist only in slasher films, and the number one thing that makes them special is that they live. At least until the sequel. What makes Final Girls so safe? Well, they follow the slasher rules. I'll let Randy, the slasher film expert from the movie Scream, that 90s meta film that hyper-analyzed all things horror, break down the 3 commandments, which he's doing right now as Halloween plays in the background.
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. For instance, number 1, you can never have sex. Big no-no! Big no!
I'm a dead man.
Sex equals death, okay? Number 2, you can never drink or do drugs. No, the sin factor. It's a sin. It's an extension of number 1. And number 3, never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, say, I'll be right back. Because you won't be back.
I'm getting another beer. You want one?
Yeah, sure.
I'll be right back.
Still, Laurie Strode set the mold, and after her, slasher films copied this idea of having a sole, innocent girl who survives the horrors that kill off all of her friends. But even without the leering camera work, there is a pattern. Buckle in, because here is where we need to talk about sex and Scream Queens and Final Girls and how right after the liberated 60s and 70s, Halloween accidentally screwed up teen girls for a generation. First, the facts. Michael's sister Judith has sex and gets murdered. Linda has sex and she gets strangled with a phone cord. Annie is about to drive off and have sex, and she gets stabbed in the car. Laurie, our final girl, does not have sex, and she lives. Like Scream says, sex is death. When Halloween became a huge hit, copycats like Friday the 13th repeated what they thought Halloween's script was saying, don't have sex or you'll die, like it had deliberately written these slasher rules. Even though Halloween didn't have any rules, and it didn't even want rules, because John's whole point was that bad stuff happens just because.
Nobody had a clue that there would be people who are interested in a darker understanding of none of it. It didn't exist. It's fun to intellectualize it. And I'm sure there are feminist classes at Oberlin College where they discuss why the virgin survives and the promiscuous girl doesn't.
But there are huge problems with this final girl rule, which is why it's important to go back to its Halloween beginnings and be very clear that it was an accident.
There is no deeper meaning to that the promiscuous girl gets killed and the virgin survives. You know what? I was a virgin at 17 in high school. A lot of girls are virgins at 17 in high school.
When Jamie Lee lost her virginity, she went right home and told her mom, which is a little weird. But what's normal is that even today, the majority of high schoolers, girls and boys, are virgins. But on screen, slasher films got morality, and then that morality got all warped.
You know, it's very easy to look at this as a kind of puritanical, you know, the sluts will get punished. But I think that ignores what was going on at the time. You know, this was a generation who grew up with the civil rights movement and women's liberation, as it was called at the time. You know what? They're all just young women trying to figure it out, and they're trying to figure it out together.
The girls aren't supposed to be divided into good versus bad. They're just 3 friends figuring out dating and adulthood and sex. Like this scene when Annie is teasing Laurie about her crush, a scene which, by the way, Deborah Hill directed.
Ben Tramer? I knew it! See, do think about things like that, huh, Laurie? Shut up. He's cute.
You know, that's a really naturalized conversation between women. You know, that kind of almost faux hostile, but still really affectionate tension that's going on in that conversation in the car is perfect. It's perfect. She should be a household name. You know, she should be up there with John Carpenter. Deborah Hill is absolutely a shining light, a patron saint.
Yeah, so I think I think that what the 2018 version of Halloween does is it, on some level, I think it does try to be realistic, but on the other level, it's kind of trying to erase the wrongs that, oh, look who it is, Kenzo Shibata, out here ready to disrupt White Suburbia.
Oh yeah, Haddonfield, beware.
Are you gonna run against Conan?
I was gonna say, I think it's a swing district.
Run against?
He's running
Oh.
for Congress in Haddonfield.
No, I'm going to be the comms manager for the campaign, Conan. I'm not going to
Yeah,
run
let's
against
go.
you.
Let's
We're going to
get it.
squad up and we're going to win this shit.
I like it. Haddonfield today, USA tomorrow.
I just know I'm in depth with my cowboy.
Haddonfield now more than ever.
Today your love, tomorrow the world.
Exactly. Second Ramones reference of the night.
Woo! I didn't even know.
This is how you roll.
Yeah, so I think that though it's important to realize that we're kind of in this annoyingly postmodern age where every single type of movie, every single type of media has to be overanalyzed, subversive as fuck. Like you have to realize that these are tropes that you're playing with, and then all of a sudden the tropes have to be inverted because like that kind of annoying podcaster, film historian said. I mean, please come on our podcast, but
now that I've insulted you, please come on.
We're clout sharks here. It don't matter.
You're negging that podcaster for us. Right? Yeah.
No, but I found it kind of I found it a little bit annoying, which says an entire generation of girls had their psyches destroyed by slasher movies.
All right,
I don't think
entire generation.
I don't think film impacts people that much. That's like that article that I was reading yesterday where that girl was like, "Oh, I didn't like Asian guys because I never saw Asian guys romancing on TV, and now that I've seen it, I'm into it." Like, I don't know.
Do you really need I mean, I was getting laid as an Asian guy before we were on TV. Like, do I need to put out a book?
You can. There's a
talk to a girl. I don't know.
I think people that
it's Forrest, what you're bringing to mind for me is if you go back and watch like Ebert and Siskel and Ebert back in the 80s, or if you watch clips of that stuff, the big thing back then was saying slasher movies are going to destroy our entire children's generation. And I mean, we got through just fine. So I would agree with what you're saying there. Yeah.
Siskel and Ebert is an amazing bellwether. I think. I think that they're an amazing like film bellwether, because I think that
and his Vincent Gallo diss is one of the greatest disses of all time.
Yeah.
Did y'all know what I'm talking about?
I know. Yeah.
He made that movie, The Brown Bunny, where he convinced Chloe Sevigny to give him a blowjob on film in a mainstream film. That's art,
the worst
I guess.
Movies of all time. Yes.
Absolutely. No, hands down. And then Ebert gave it a bad review, and Vincent Gallo said, "Well, you're a fat piece of shit," or something of that nature.
Oh, yeah, I was reading.
He said he had the physique of a slave trader.
Yeah, that's a super fucked up thing to say.
Yeah.
So then Ebert's reply was, "Yeah, I'm fat, but one day I'll be skinny. But you will always be the guy that made The Brown Bunny."
And Ebert will always be the guy that wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which is actually a good movie in my opinion. Yeah. But that's just me.
Yeah,
I mean, I think Ebert takes the cake for me for writing positive reviews of the movie Cars, like both Cars 1 and Cars 2, which I love. Like, I love that he loved Cars 2 especially, which is like a pretty fun movie. But on the other hand, like, he trashed Fight Club and The Usual Suspects, which I love also. Let's
go piss on their graves. No, is that too far? No,
the man gives opinions for a living. You're not necessarily going to be right 100% of the time, but
I actually dig the fact that he trashed both Fight Club and The Usual Suspects, because I don't like either of those movies.
I mean,
I love both those movies, but I get it.
I was just going to say the last thing on Roger Ebert, and then I'll go into the background for a second. But I was going to say it's interesting because his relationship, I think, to horror films changed over time. He was a big critic, I think, especially of those slasher movies, the Nightmare on Elm Streets and all of those. But by the time Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out, he was a big fan of that movie, whereas his co-host, I don't know if it was Roper or if it was still Siskel at the time, he said he thought it was a great movie. It was a postmodernist sort of deconstruction of the genre, and he sort of liked the postmodern approach to it. So even he warmed up to some of these movies over time.
Well, they liked Halloween, though. They liked Halloween. They didn't,
because Halloween transcends the genre. That's why
the genre didn't exist, though. I think is the point that we were trying.
But it transcends the genre while at the same point embodying the genre, which is why it's an incredibly iconic film.
And why the sequels suck too, because the sequels just try to be like, for a while there, I remember Halloween was supposed to be each movie was supposed to be like a different story. That was what they originally went with. But like Michael Myers was so popular that Halloween 2 is just a straight sequel. Halloween 3 was a different movie entirely and fun. It's garbage, but it's fun garbage.
I remember
Halloween 3 Season of the Witch rules.
It does, but it's not. I don't think it's. I think of it as a Halloween movie.
I remember when Halloween was just about dressing up and hoping some creepy adult in your neighborhood tries to slip some drugs into your jack-o'-lantern. But
Drugs,
you know what?
but not razor blades.
But not razor
You have the
blades.
razor blades at home to cut up the drugs. You don't need them to give that to you in the candy bar.
Halloween 3 is no chopping mall. Thank you.
Oh,
You
I love
dropped the
Chopping
Chopping
Mall.
Mall reference. Made my night.
I love Chopping Mall.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about which is like a more fundamental question, I guess, like to even begin with, why Halloween? And in the 1978 movie, there's a
Why
couple of
fucking
scenes-
not, bro?
What?
Starting with Black.
No, wait.
You
I'll
start with
get
Black Christmas, then you get to Halloween.
That's
your year,
that's Danny McBride's answer, by the way. Like when someone asked him to justify why he was gonna make it right into Halloween, why the fuck not, bro?
Maybe
No,
it's because I watched Tropic
hear
Thunder
it, by the
twice. Maybe it's because I watched Tropic Thunder twice last night. I'm on a Danny McBride kick.
No, I was more referring to the fact that in the 1978 movie, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, Laurie, right? Like there's a couple of scenes where she looks out and she points out how these kids are believing this superstition or something like that, and like this kind of almost cynical view towards superstition, and that's kind of fascinating that it's juxtaposing with the kind of becoming more and more nuclear family neoliberalism type economy, and it's like what does that mean that, like, an economy like that is still maintaining a superstition at the same time, or are both of them myths on some level?
I was just gonna say in response to that, I think one of the interesting ways one could describe the 1978 Halloween is, it's essentially a movie about Laurie Strode. She's babysitting this kid who believes in the boogeyman, and she's trying to tell him the whole time, the boogeyman is not real, kid. The boogeyman's not real. And then at the end, she realizes, oh my God, the boogeyman's real.
Yeah,
that's sort of the core of the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember watching a movie like that when I was a kid. But anyway, there was a.
But it's an outside force. That harkens back to the earlier point, right? That Michael Myers is an outside force into the quote unquote perfect idyllic suburban existence, and that's what made it so terrifying to so many people, because they've fled away from all that crime and all those bad schools and whatnot into these suburban areas.
Nice
where
Joe Biden session.
Safe. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, he's also, I think Michael Myers, I love that they call him the Shape, right? Because he's very different than like a Freddy Krueger or a Jason Voorhees or a Chucky. It's like all of those characters sort of have like motives. I guess Chucky just enjoys killing people. He's a sadist.
I was gonna say Chucky's the outlier in that for sure. Chucky's
you never really know.
Complex.
You never know why Michael does it.
He wants to be a real boy. Let him be.
It's Pinocchio. But seriously, you don't. They never really explain in that first movie, why is Michael Myers doing all this? There's like no rhyme or reason. He just sort of.
Well, that's. And that's on purpose. And that's it's purposeful. And I think
that's what makes it scary. Yeah.
Yeah. No, exactly 100%. That's why John Carpenter thought it was scary when he and his girlfriend that he was cheating on throughout the course of making this movie wrote it together.
Kills and eats a dog. Who does that?
Michael Myers. That's who. No.
Michael Myers. Who also, by the way, where did that fool get his driver's ed? Because that guy's driving all over town in that first movie. I was like, where did that guy?
The Man in Black.
It's explained in Halloween 6.
There's no such thing as Halloween 6, sir.
I love the fact that you pointed out that the outside force is actually the idyllic suburban existence, because and again, it's also pretty cool that you have the Haddonfield next to you, because it almost seems like the idyllic suburban district is actually a pretty shitty hellhole that votes for the kind of least appealing Democrat in all electoral races. kind of fascinating. Like, what do you have to say about like, do you think it was the same at that time as well? Like, the suburb always let down more radical like politics.
This is why Karthik is one of the more interesting people to come on this show, because like he'll sit back in the cut for like 20 minutes and they'll come out with something like that, and you're like, oh,
you should have been out for the player. You could have
like, no, these motherfuckers voted for Reagan.
Karthik is our ghost face. Let's face it.
But I'll take that.
Forrest is Jizza. Forrest is definitely Jizza because he likes to Jizza. I'm sorry, I was not going to go there with that joke, and then I did.
You should have left it there.
I thought it was all the coffee and cigarettes. I thought it was going to be everyone's looking for old dirty bastard.
Well, I'm in recovery right now, so I'm allowed coffee and cigarettes. That's what I've been telling myself and everyone else.
So back on point.
If you're in a recovery enough, that's your whole diet. There's no food involved.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a certain level of like AA. You reach a certain AA belt, and then or NA belt, and then all of a sudden like you're only allowed to have coffee and cigarettes.
I'm the Jim Jarmusch diet.
Wait, what was it in the player when he's like, oh, I've been going to the AA meetings. He's like, oh, you have a drinking problem? And he's like, no, that's where all the deals are made now.
But back to the point, I think if Haddonfield, Illinois was a real place, I think these days it would not only be a swing district, but would have the kind of like tabula rosa, a Democrat that's like, oh, he's a veteran, or like whatever, or like a lawyer, prosecutor, or something, like some nothing Democrat running. Probably went for Trump in 2016, went for Biden, but just barely in 2020.
That's what I was getting at.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
You're describing my district right now.
But I think in 78,
you literally are, and it kind of looks like Haddonfield if you go to certain parts of it.
And I think in 78, it was probably solid Democratic, and that tells you the difference between the 78 movie versus the 2018 movie. So go forth now. That's what I wanted to get at. That was it.
I was just going to say that gets back to what I was trying to get across earlier with. I think throughout most of the sequels, except for maybe the second one, I think you get this impression that there's maybe a Republican underbelly to Haddonfield. In some of the sequels, you have like a vigilante sort of rednecks trying to stop Michael at one point, and I think you see a little of that in like 2018's movie. There's like a lot of rural elements to it and whatnot. I think it's an interesting take because I think there is that like impression that these people could vote for Trump.
In real life,
it's kind of like Lanford, how in the original Roseanne series they weren't Republicans, and maybe Lanford and Haddonfield are adjoining suburbs.
Then Roseanne had a little bit too much NyQuil, and
maybe Roseanne is Michael Myers, or actually Dan is the more body type though.
Don't talk about
every time Roseanne cut him down, he would get out his anger by like chopping up people over in Haddonfield. And never got caught.
Before you came in, I think I brought up how Michael Myers greatly resembles like Ryan Adams, and could easily be like a kind of emo country singer who writes a lot of sad songs about love and loss and all of that. And that's kind of how why he has to stab people, because that's kind of his way of making a mark.
Loomis should have handed him an acoustic.
And have you ever seen Barton Fink?
Yes, love that one.
Because that John Goodman terrifies the shit out of me after watching that movie.
The Coen brothers found a way to make that guy edgy.
More than edgy, everything's burning behind him, and he's a serial killer. I